WPVM FM at 103.7 here in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen on WPVM.org. This program is sponsored in part by the Mountain Coalition for Healthcare Decisions, and we're grateful for their support. I'm Greg Lathrop, and you're listening to Third Messenger Radio Hour, offering Asheville unique coverage, a global perspective on the culture of being with dying. Our segments include interviews, music, round-the-world coverage, and an ear on the conversation of the art of being with dying. Your future awaits. This is Flesh and Bone with Buddy Guy and Van Morrison.
Daddy read the good book through and through. He said the Lord's word is the only truth. It ain't over the day you die. We all live on in the sweet by and by. This life is more than flesh and bone. Find out now before you're gone. Life is more than flesh and bone.
Now I know my daddy was right. I read that good book and I've seen the light. Mama and daddy have passed and gone. They are still with me, 'cause love lives on. This life is more than flesh and bone. Find out now before you gone. When you go, your spirit lives on. Flesh and bone. The God I feel is real as rain, more than words can ever explain.
We'll meet again some sweet day, far beyond this world of pain.
This life is more than flesh and bone.
Find out now before you're gone.
When you go, your spirit goes on.
This life is more
than flesh and bone.
flesh and bone.
Today we're talking with Caroline Yongue. She's the director of the Center for End-of-Life Transitions and the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary. The sanctuary is the first conservation burial ground in North Carolina. Caroline is a Buddhist minister and a teacher, and recently taken monastic vows. She's a death care midwife, doula for the dying, and has been dubbed one of Asheville's Green Reapers. Well, so I have to start there. I'm very interested in what it means to be dubbed one of Asheville's Green Reapers.
Several years ago, Verve magazine did an article about green burial options and preparing for death. And Carol Motley of Bury Me Naturally, Kim Zorn, Green Casket Company, and myself were interviewed, and they called us the Green Reapers.
My first image, I have to tell you, as I read that, was of the Green Hornet driving around in a green LTD, stomping out injustice.
We're stomping out death and justice.
So that pretty much begins a lead-in into talking about the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary. What can you tell us about that? It's a brand new thing here, and the only one in North Carolina. It's having the opportunity to walk with you on that land today. It's a beautiful, beautiful site. A lot of work has already been done. And so this would be a great time to let our listeners know what kinds of options are available to us in relation to green burial. Tell me about it.
I will. So about 18 years ago, I met Dr. Billy and Kimberly Campbell of Memorial Ecosystems. The couple created the first conservation burial ground in the United States and perhaps in the world, and it's in Westminster, South Carolina. So I've kind of held that idea through the years, and about 8 years ago, I attempted to open a conservation burial ground in Black Mountain, but the timing wasn't right. It was right when the financial crash was happening. And so now we have the opportunity to make it a reality. And they are consultants on this project. What it means to have a conservation burial ground or to be buried in a conservation burial ground is that the land itself is placed in a conservation easement, so there are strict guidelines on what can be done within the land and how the land is taken care of. The graves are dug by hand. There won't be any heavy equipment opening the graves, so it'll protect the land around the graves and the other grave sites. The body can't have been embalmed. There's no formaldehyde going into the earth. The land is taken out in layers. The root mass is set aside, and then the other layers are taken out and set aside, and then they're put back in reverse order so that the earth reestablishes itself a little more easily. The graves are 3 feet deep instead of 6, so that our nutrients will actually benefit what's planted above. The law says there has to be 18 inches of earth over the body. Some people are concerned about animals getting into the graves, and it just doesn't happen because in reality, because we put all the earth back, there's actually 3 feet of earth over the body. And then the graves are marked with a native stone laying flat on the ground, and that can be engraved. It'll feel like you're in a natural setting. There will be footpath trails and golf cart trails, and it's just a lovely place to go for a walk. We'll be able to do memorial services and weddings and other events there.
And so that's a long time coming. I think I heard you say at one point 18 years it took for this to come to fruition and walking the land today. What's the story behind you? That's a very committed vigil for you to hold.
Well, I was busy with death care all during that period of time. So my Buddhist teacher asked me almost 20 years ago to learn how to tend the bodies of our Buddhist group, the members of our Buddhist group when they died, so that the body could be undisturbed for 3 days. And this is based on Buddhist beliefs about what happens after the last breath for the next 3 days. So I learned how to do that, and then people in our Asheville community heard that I could do those practices and began to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was that most people were unprepared for the death event.
Mm.
And so through the years, we developed educational programs through the Center for End-of-Life Transitions. That's how that came into being. It's a project of our Buddhist group, which is Anatta Satimaga. And the burial ground is also a project of our Buddhist group.
Mm-hmm.
And so for Center for End-of-Life Transitions, we offer education, we offer assistance with death care practices,
Mm-hmm.
and we can act as liaison between the family and the funeral home if funeral homes are used. The North Carolina law states that family members and loved ones have the legal right to act as funeral director,
Mm-hmm.
and they have the legal right to transport their deceased loved one in their own car.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people don't know what their options are, so that's one of the goals of our projects is to let people know that they have options.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard to negotiate those options on your own, especially if death has just happened. And that's where our project can come into play to act as support and liaison.
Right. That's a challenging time.
It's very challenging.
In my experience of that, in my own family, in my own life, at that time, and I'm a registered nurse and worked in hospice a long time myself, but there's no thinking that's happening at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I honor that aspect of what you're talking about, and that is knowing what our options are. Do you have an example of the kinds of options that people may or may not know about what they can do for themselves in this phase of their life, and then subsequently they're dying?
Well, I think preparing is primary. That, we think about who's going to be making the decisions for the end of our lives when we can't speak for ourselves. Choosing that person can be difficult. We often think that it should be our spouse or a family member, but sometimes that's not the best choice. And so having given it some thought ahead of time lets you be more comfortable, and then your loved ones are informed. It seems like that when someone's dying, the more informed the loved ones are, the more ease there is.
Mm-hmm.
There's less distress around wondering how they can be of support. And then extending that planning to what you want to have done with your body after death.
Mm-hmm.
So, the options are burial in a traditional cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the least green thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It comes with a lot of toxins and pollutants. And the next is possibly cremation, and even cremation can have an environmental impact.
Mm-hmm.
There are some cemeteries around that offer a green option. They're called hybrid green cemeteries, where it's a regular cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
They may have a portion of the cemetery that's set aside for green burial. Mm-hmm. And they may choose to do some of the things that I mentioned before for conservation burial. And conservation burial has the strictest guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being proactive, all of us are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that is true, and then we are surprised when it happens. So of all the deaths that I've been a part of and assisted with, the people who had prepared for their death and had left a plan for their loved ones and their friends, I have to say that at those deaths, I was joyous because the people got to have the death they wanted, and their loved ones were able to follow their plan. Mm-hmm. And they were left with the gift. The loved ones and friends were left with a gift, and that was the plan.
The plan.
The actual plan that the person had made.
Yeah.
And they were all so grateful.
Yeah. It does create a lightness.
It does,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
It's and you're talking to our mission with Third Messenger Radio. The mission that we have is ultimately to cultivate the sacred art of being with dying. Mm-hmm. And so that's what you're talking about.
It is.
To be with it. In words that are paraphrasing other beautiful teachers in what we might call this conscious dying movement that is, I think, getting bigger, larger, and I'm glad to see that. But my experience about that is, as we are willing to look into the mirror of our death and dying, what I have seen is the beauty of my life and my living,
Yes.
right? So it is a beautiful, non-taboo topic, actually, if we're willing to go there. So in relation to the Green Burial and the Conservation Memorial Sanctuary, or the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, which is a conservation ground. So a little bit more about perhaps how can someone have their body offered to the earth there? There's probably even different ways that they can do that through the conservation site that you have. In other words, some people may want to be cremated.
That's correct.
And also have their ashes delivered to this site, or perhaps they want to have their body fully buried, intact. Perhaps, in some of my understanding, maybe they don't even want a coffin. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So if a person wants to have their body buried, it would be buried in a biodegradable container or no container, a casket, a biodegradable casket or shroud, and they don't even have to choose to have a shroud. And then cremated remains can be buried, and cremains can be scattered. And this is also a burial ground for our pets as well. No large animals. These would be household pets.
So no horses.
No horses. I already had a request for
Have you?
horses,
Well,
and
I was
it's
wondering,
just
yeah.
I don't. It's a small. It's it's a fairly small burial ground considering So it's big enough for us, but it would be hard for us to accommodate burying a horse because we're only taking golf carts into the sanctuary.
Right. That would be quite a challenge.
But they are loved ones. They're still loved ones.
They are indeed.
Yes.
They are indeed. And what you're saying is not uncommon. Again, I'll relate to my family. When my wife crossed over in 2013, she did leave a plan, even though it was unexpected.
Yeah.
So I guess we can talk about what's unexpected and what isn't, because she had a plan.
That's fantastic.
And the plan also included, and she was one with all of the dogs. And so every dog that we've had through our life together was cremated and kept for the time when she would die.
Wow.
And so they're all still waiting. So that was very important to her.
Yeah.
That was also a part
That's
of
great.
it as well.
Yeah.
And so this is that aspect of being with dying that relates to the green approach, the conservational approach, which is a beautiful one. And actually, the land that I saw today is just a beautiful place to walk.
It is.
And it's been just recently maintained and cleared of the invasive plants and all of that. So you have the beautiful trees that are remaining, that you can just envision this grassy knoll and some of the other plant life you're talking about. So there's a whole aspect of this this sanctuary that is definitely related to the plant life.
Absolutely.
Talk
It is.
about that a little bit.
Well, there are distinct habitats within the sanctuary. There's as far as burial goes, or disposition of the remains, there is the southeastern meadow, which is the top part of the hilly area, which will be mostly grasslands, and will reestablish with native grasses, a few trees, and then as you go down the sides of the hill, and there will be a wooded area, and then on the north side of McDowell Creek runs through the property, and then on the north side will also be the woodlands, and then at the creek side is a different habitat. There's also a significant wetlands on the property that is just going to kind of be the showpiece of the property. Yeah. And all of these areas have to be reestablished now with native plants. And it's going to be a big and fun process.
So it's a big community event. I mean, this is not no small piece of land.
It is not. And we also invite people to just come walk on the land. It'll have trails that'll be conducive to just a nice walk.
Yes. So you have a big, you must have a fairly large volunteer community, or no?
Not yet. We're starting to establish that. So far, we haven't been able to divvy out tasks because it's been the big project of taking out the non-native plants. And now that that is done, we've uncovered 3 or 4 still remaining major projects that have to be undertaken. So we're in the fundraising phase now.
Well, it looks like it's on its way.
It is on its way. I think that another aspect of the burial ground, aside from being green, is that I've also realized with Center for End of Life Transitions is that when loved ones and family can be involved in the after-death care and taking care of their loved one, their grief process is, they're able to move through that in a different way because they were able to participate. And that's the same thing with this conservation burial ground. Loved ones have the opportunity to help open the grave or close the grave. They're walking through nature to help bury their loved one. It's more inclusive. And it's just a beautiful way to be a part of the whole process.
Right. So they can actually dig their own grave?
They can assist in that. There'll be guidance to assist with that.
I know some traditions that's certainly an important part of the ceremony where the family participates in digging the grave itself.
There'll be someone from the sanctuary who will help with the guidance of that in case you hit rocks or something like that. And then native plants can be planted on top. The different plants would depend on which habitat the burial takes place in.
Wonderful. You're listening to WPVM FM at 103.7 here in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen on WPVM.org. This program is sponsored in part by the Mountain Coalition for Healthcare Decisions, and we're grateful for their support. This is Soul Driven Train, Don't Wear Black, and we'll be back with Caroline Yongue.
What should we do with your body after you're dead and gone? Would you prefer the backyard or the lawn? Should we throw you in the river or bury you by the sea, back behind the church, the old cemetery with your family? Should we plant you in the garden and let your body feed the earth? Death and decay, you can find rebirth. In death and decay, you'll surely find rebirth. Oh, but don't wear black on the day you lay me down. Don't look back, just walk away, don't turn around. No, but don't wear black on the day you lay me down. Don't look back, just walk away, don't turn around. You could build for me a funeral pyre, lay my body on the fire, and send my ashes higher and higher and higher across the sea. Jerry, let an offshore breeze carry me away. When the last time I'll ride upon the waves. Don't wear black on the day you lay me down.
I'm going to consider shifting gears for a moment and talk a little bit more about your role as a Buddhist minister and a teacher. And I'm interested that we are sitting in your beautiful home having a beautiful conversation around dying, and there are things that brought you and I to this place that were probably from long ago, our story, in other words. Would you be willing to share, what is your story? What has brought you to this place today in your life where the aspect of serving those who are dying, teaching related to the beauty of that in the Buddhist tradition that you hold? How would you describe your story? What's brought you here?
I grew up in a family where our religious life, to my parents particularly, was very important. We'd go to church every Sunday. And in the 70s, I was in high school, and it was early 70s, it was during integration. And we were in church, and someone came into the church, and 3 black people came into the church, African Americans came in the church, and about 30 of the congregation got up and walked out.
Oh.
And I just was devastated by it, and I told my parents that I wasn't going back. But what I continued to be important to me was my parents' commitment to their spiritual path. And the spiritual path is important to me, but it took me probably a decade or more to figure out what that was. And I dabbled in many different spiritual practices, and then finally met my teacher, Nancy Spence, and Sherry Huber. And so I was introduced to Buddhism, and I was told that I could learn how to stop suffering, that it was my own mind that created my suffering. And that intrigued me. So the more I practiced what they taught, the less suffering I had. And then when I found myself suffering, if I could shift my mind, the suffering went away. And then the gift of my teacher asking me to learn how to tend bodies, it was a huge gift. It was an extremely wonderful gift. It has taken my spiritual practice to levels I never could have imagined. When I step into a door to help someone with after-death care, Caroline stays outside, and something else enters the home. And there's just open heart. There's compassion for myself and whoever's in the home. There's an awareness of what is happening and what needs to be done. And there's no agenda. Every death is different. And I think that, because I learned so much, people wanted to know, and that came to the teaching aspect. So that's how that all came to be.
That's a nice story. And so that brings you then to your work with the Center for End-of-Life Transitions and the doula work that you're doing and the teaching that you're doing. That certainly seems to be your laser focus.
It is.
And it is the teachings of transforming your suffering that brought you there. Is that accurate?
I'd say that's accurate.
Yeah, to this place. What would you say, and we're going to not ask too hard of a question, but one that is just, what is your message? What is the message that you want to share with the people all the time related to this? Is there the message that you want people to know about living and dying?
Yes. I believe that we become so self-centered with what is going on in our own lives, and we put death so far out of our minds that we forget that everyone we see, everything we see, every living being that we see is going to die. And if we could hold that in our hearts and our minds, when we're standing in the checkout line and irritation arises, if we bring that thought to our heart and to our mind, compassion will arise.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go through life with more ease and more love in our hearts, because we're not clouded over with this belief that we're in this world by ourselves, in our own world by ourselves.
That's beautiful. Thanks for the message.
You're welcome.
So we're speaking with Caroline Yongue, and she's the director for the Center of End-of-Life Transitions and the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, which is actually located off Old Fanning Bridge Road. Be a very beautiful land out there. Caroline, how can people get a hold of you?
They can go to either of the websites, Center for End-of-Life Transitions, it's ceolt.org, or carolinamemorialsanctuary.org, and either email me or call me and make arrangements if they want to come out and see the land, or if they have questions they want answered.
Beautiful. I certainly am grateful for the opportunity to sit with you today.
Thank you.
And I wish you to go well.
Thank you very much.
The grace that has been for many of us the encounter of reading the profound works and poems of one of the essential spiritual writers on the spirit and being around relationship to dying, died. We knew him as Stephen Levine. I'm now reading from his eulogy. Stephen passed away at home in his bed this afternoon after a long illness. He was 78 years old. His heart has gone to God. His light is left here with us. Thank you for your blessings and love and friendship. Namaste. His eulogy continues. Levine, though deeply associated with Buddhism, Theravada and Vipassana especially, was influenced by various spiritual traditions. He was also a friend of Ram Dass, and like him, was a student of Neem Karoli Baba. Levine's writings thus addressed Hindu and other concepts as well as the Buddhist ones. With Ram Dass, he studied with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the mid-70s and would become an eloquent expounder on the matter of death, writing Who Dies? Meetings at the Edge, A Year to Live, and Healing into Life and Death. Levine was also committed to other forms of expression, having co-founded the San Francisco Oracle in the mid-60s and writing poetry and personally flavored essays and teachings as exemplified in Levine's A Gradual Awakening. His most recent book was Becoming Kuan Yin, The Evolution of Compassion. Stephen lived in the Southwest with Andrea Levine, where he remained local due to his health concerns, but produced video teachings via their website, levinetalks.com. Our thoughts and best wishes are with Andrea Levine, son Noah Levine, a Buddhist teacher in his own right, and all who were touched by Stephen's life and work. Here's a clip from Andrea and Stephen Levine's last couch talk before he died.
Being with others in a merciful, loving way, being part of the divine suchness of being, really prepares you for dying, like nothing else. Being okay with others' suffering. It takes a long time to be okay with others' suffering. You just want to change it. You want to change it, and to be able to just soften, to be able to just care for somebody else, to just be able to hear what might be needed. And sometimes what might be needed is just being quiet. Just mostly it is listening and caring for somebody else, and knowing that sometimes life deals us a hand that really we can do nothing about, except open to, except send love into, except be mindful of, and move toward the center of whatever the experience is. Dying can be very difficult. Everybody doesn't have a great death. In fact, the really great deaths are probably, and I say great death, I mean somebody who dies with their heart open and fear doesn't obscure or block or dull the reception, the details of what's going on. Sometimes we have that. Sometimes we have a time where, it's just, we've seen people just melt. Their life is done. It's not a big spiritual, it's not a big social, it's just like, oh, I'm finished. And there's a sense of just completion. And it's not Christian and it's not Jewish, it's not even religious. It's the spirit itself, simple and easy as it was, having entered, we step from the river, we're patted off, and we become. That's our life.
Live life.
You are ready.
Live life like you're gonna die. Because you're gonna. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you're gonna die. Maybe not today or even next year, but before you know it, you'll be saying, is this all there was? What was all the fuss? Why did I bother? Now, maybe you won't suffer, maybe it's quick, but you'll have time to think, why did I waste it? Why didn't I taste it? You'll have time. 'Cause you're gonna die. Yes, it's gonna happen because it's happened to a lot of people I know. My mother, my father, my loves, the president, the kings, and the pope. They all had hope, and they muttered just before they went, maybe I won't go. Live life like you're gonna die, because you are. Maybe you won't suffer, maybe it's quick, but you'll have time to think, why did I waste it? Why didn't I taste it? You'll have time, 'cause you're gonna die. You're gonna die. I tell you who else left us, passed on, gone to heaven, no longer with us. Johnny Cash. Dead. JFK, that guy in the Stones. Dead. Lou Gehrig, Einstein, and Joey Ramone. Joey Ramone. Have I convinced you? Do you read my lips? This may come as news, but it's time. You're gonna die. You're gonna die. By the time you hear this, I may well be dead. And you, my friend, might be next. 'Cause we're all gonna die. Yeah. Oh, maybe you won't suffer. And maybe it's quick, but you'll have time to think, why did I waste it? Why didn't I taste it? You'll have time. You'll have time. 'Cause you're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die. Yes, you're gonna die.
That was William Shatner's take on the same subject. That song entitled, You'll Have Time. Here's a short poem from Stephen Levine, entitled Poetry Reading is a Silence Between Breaths. There is a silence between breaths, when the heart becomes a sacred flame, and the belly uncoils, which reminds me how remarkable it is to wake beside you another day. Between deaths, we dream together. Between breaths, in that stillness which has joined us ever since. In that first breath, we step onto the dance floor and waltz unnoticed through the void. The sacred everywhere we turn and turn again, as form so generously dissolves and only the beloved remains. In this moment which lasts a lifetime, there is nowhere to stand where you are not beside me, where you do not accompany me within.
You know, we so often miss the moment. There are times in our lives we look back and we say, oh, if only I had listened more closely, if only I had said, what that person was telling me they needed to hear, if only I was more present, more caring, if only I was paying more attention. It's usually what it comes down to when we miss the moment. We miss a lot of moments in our lives. Sometimes those moments might be a turning moment. There might be a time when, if we had heard something, an initiatory movement of energy might have taken us to the next level, or taken another person, even more importantly, to the next level. Just knowing that, instead of being filled with remorse, just knowing, look how that happens. And more and more often, you will be at the very beginning of your own thoughts. You'll notice when a thought arises, so you'll notice when that happens in your environment, and you'll stop missing the moment. And maybe there'll be a second or two into it, and all of a sudden you'll catch it, as though you were slipping, and you got your balance, and you were there present, and that person got what they needed, and you get what you needed, and you didn't miss the moment. It's a wonderful thing not to miss the moment with your children, with your wife, with your husband, with your parents, with that toad in the grass. It's important to not miss the moment. Our life is made of moments. When we meditate, it's moment-to-moment presence. And that's all it really is slowing down to the moment-to-moment, a moment of hearing, a moment of smelling, a moment of tasting. And you don't have to do anything if you just sit there. If we just sit there now in this moment, it's moment-to-moment. There's a moment of feeling. I feel the glass in my hand. I hear my voice. I hear an expectation of what's coming. To keep abreast of what is going on while it's going on, we often employ the skillful means of noting what's happening while it's happening. Feeling the glass, the first thing I might note is feeling. Then I might note cold. Then I might note the contents of it, and I just watch. The mind's doing this all by itself. The I is an afterthought. Oh, I am thinking, I am feeling. No, that's a thought. And when that thought arises, that moment arises, don't miss that moment. Watch the dream of I arise, trying to own everything that's happening. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Which is all very cute when it's a glass. But then sometimes you think, I've done something wrong. And shame or guilt comes up. The I am attaches to something, you slipped, you lost your balance that time, you didn't catch yourself before you fell. And then you're sitting on the floor, your rump is bothered, somebody in the room is crying, you feel, oh, did I hurt myself? And if you miss the moment, if you don't at that moment say, big surprise. Look at the mind going in a tizzy about gravity. Sometimes we slip and we fall. We are not taught, we are not conditioned to pay attention. If someone asks me, what's the value of life? Why are we born? What's the meaning of life? All I can say is, pay attention. When we're paying attention, we're alive. When we're not paying attention, we're dreaming. When we close our eyes and we concentrate on the sensation of the breath, we'll say at our nostrils, while we're on that breathing, the nostrils, the waves of breathing, the tides of breathing, during that time, we are present. We may be more able to be born in that time of simply watching the breath. You can't think your way to freedom. You can think your way to satisfaction. So you have that momentary, I've got it. But I've got it. How does it help the woman sitting next to you? How does your getting it? How does it manifest in the world? How do you connect the inner and the outer so that your meditation becomes a living meditation, so that you don't have to close your eyes to feel your breath? That right as I'm speaking now, there is inside my voice, the sound of my voice is not a single thing. It's made up of multiple hundreds of millions of moments of sound that we are putting together in our mind. What if we just listen to the sound of our voice as a thousand snowflakes of sound, building up into enough sound to cover the ground? We say, oh, I recognize that tune. Just being, letting life express itself, moment to moment awareness. It's very simple. Don't attribute it to a God. Don't attribute it to I. Attribute it to the miracle of being. Just the miracle that you and I can meet like this and not know who we are. The scrambling for self-identification is such suffering. And it causes holy wars, and it causes meanness of spirit, and it causes a lack of forgiveness, and it causes cruelty and unkindness and forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is deadly. Just the breath. Just the cascade of sound, moment to moment sound, moment to moment unfolding at the ear, going through the biochemical transformations that allows the vibration at the eardrum to turn into sound, that reaches all of our conditioning before it even opens into recognition of what the sound is of. Oh, it's a J. Oh, it's a car backfiring. Oh, it's a gun firing. And you just, before you, all that has to go on, the sound at the ear, the rattling, the movement of biochemical turning into electrical energy that then becomes understood and recognized by the mind, the chances of actually observing what's going on in front of us is slight. What we experience is what we think about what's going on, what we imagine is going on, what we associate with what's going on, instead of just breathing in, breathing out. Sound as the unfolding of moment to moment vibration in the air against the eardrum, down the canal of conditioning, of fear, of self-protection, of can I let this in? Can I make this sound something that it reinforces the fears that create the sense of self? Can I just be? One of the great things about aging is it insists that we just be. We don't know how to do that. To just be takes so much love, so much willingness to be seen. We're all God's fool. This sound of my voice is just the Big Bang continuing. We are so fortunate to not know. If we trust not knowing, if we just be. Oh, well, if I just be, then I won't be anyone. Two rabbis, Andrea belly tightens now as I tell this joke for the 10,000th time.
I softened. I was just going to sing "Row, Row Your Boat," but
That's
this
right.
is better. No, go to the rabbis. To the rabbis. I haven't heard this.
Two rabbis are in front of the shul, in front of the temple, and they're just straightening things out and looking at the Torah, and they see in the back of the temple is a guy sweeping the room. And they're up in front of the Torah, in front of the fancy repercussions of believing you're someone and have a religion, have to be that way, and in front of it, and they're beating their chest and they're saying, I'm nobody, just emphasizing that God is so big and I am so small. It's like a Monty Python movie. And I am nobody. I am nobody. One rabbi says to the cantor says to the rabbi, and back and forth. You see at the back of the room, the guy who's sweeping up is also saying, I'm nobody. And they turn to each other and they say, look who thinks he's nobody.
You know that.
That's the crazy mind. You can see we are stretching to try to give you more. We love you, and we hope that you will take care of yourself.
Please treasure yourselves as we treasure ourselves. You treasure yourself, you'll be okay. Everything will work out. But you got to treasure yourself. Don't be looking outside yourself for someone else to do it first. Row, row. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
You're listening to WPVM FM at 103.7 here in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen on WPVM.org. This program is sponsored in part by the Mountain Coalition for Healthcare Decisions, and we're grateful for their support.
What we can do is, yes, when you see actual death comes, say if our mental attitude is trained or make certain kind of attitude towards death, then at the time of death comes, we can remain peace. And even there were some stories. There are some stories. Great practitioner, old age practitioner, when is death about to come, then you see some of these old practitioners, then you see they are very excited. So they are, instead of afraid or instead of fear for death, because you see, there's a time of change. It's this old decayed body, and then take new body, new fresh, young body, more energetic. I think those sort of people who believe rebirth. But then you see, ordinary people, I feel it is useful. You see, develop some kind of attitude towards death. That is, accept death as a part of our life.
Well, that's about it for today. This is Third Messenger Radio Hour, where we cultivate the art and being with dying. Produced by Third Messenger. Our story editor is Saeed Osio. Producer, Jason Hebel. And I'm your announcer, Greg Lathrop. Thanks for joining us, and go well.
And then they familiarize your death. Then actual death comes. Your mind can remain more calm. Otherwise, you see, usually this is just avoid about think about death. Then actual death comes. You are not prepared. Because it's too much sort of shock or too much sort of frightened. As a Buddhist monk, in my daily practice, I always remember about death and also the process of death and the energy of the body, element of the body, they step by step dissolve into subtle level. Stages or different sort of process of the dissolving these elements. So that's very useful. Suppose to face better when my death comes, but I'm not very sure. Effective or not, I'm not very sure.